the hindsight of it all is that the greater the stress that we put ourselves under, the more transformation we're capable of, and starting to really embrace the journey that we've created, not just for ourselves as a species, but for this planet at this moment where we have become this, existential threat in some ways. We are this force that's transmuting so much energy on this planet, and we could have judgment on it, it's good or it's bad or things like this, but the reality is we are this radical force of nature that is causing major changes on this planet. And nature never loses an opportunity to raise the vibration, raise the beauty, raise the intelligence of life with the next iteration.
That was Dr. Zach Bush, and you're listening to The Regenerative Journey.
From wherever we are, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia, recognising their continuing connection to this land, its waterways, the stars in the skies since time immemorial. We pay our respects to the elders, knowledge holders, and to all the generations of First Nations peoples who have nurtured their unceded sovereign lands for over 80,000 years and continue to do so today.
G'day, I'm your host Charlie Arnott, an 8th generational Australian regenerative farmer. And in this podcast series, I'll be diving deep and exploring my guests' unique perspectives on the world so you can apply their experience and knowledge to cultivate your own transition to a more regenerative way of life.
Welcome to The Regenerative Journey with your host Charlie Arnott.
Zach, the bush, doctor, it's so lovely to have that car going.
Let's get that going. Yeah. Let's get it.
Thank you for your time. Interrupting somewhat of a day of or a week of work and some downtime, which I believe you've been having, which is wonderful here in Byron Bay. You're only here for 10 days, 9 days. Welcome back.
So glad to be here with you, Charlie. It's just a pleasure to be in this community, and Australia's lighting up. I'm pretty excited about what's going on here.
Well, I've got to say, you're helping light it up. It's December. It was like early December last year you were here, and you lit it up. You were on a bit of a tour, like you did Brisbane, Byron, Melbourne, Sydney, in a pretty short period of time too. So thank you for sharing and giving of yourself so that we may join your conversations and support Farmers Footprint here in Australia. Where I wanted to start was I want to make sure we talk about the retreat because that was awesome. Yeah. I just touched on that a second ago. How's your temperature? You warm?
It'll stay warm in here a bit, but I think I'm fine.
You okay?
Yeah. I think if we open things up, it's going to get noisy.
Sure. Given it's 11 months since you were here, you alluded to it a couple of times at the retreat. What's changed for you in the last 11 months? And not just, it could be anything. It could be some paradigms have changed, some directions, some perspectives. This could be a 3-hour conversation in itself, but it became apparent to me that things may have changed a little bit in a good way.
Yeah.
Can you just touch on whatever comes to mind in that?
Yeah.
Set a new scene, man.
Yeah, I think we've all changed so much, month to month over the last 5 years. There's just the planetary pressure cooker that we've put ourselves in seems in hindsight to be so intentional, right? You wonder why global fear and guilt shame paradigms break out and why we call them, pandemics or wars or whatever we're going to name them next. But the hindsight of it all is that the greater the stress that we put ourselves under, the more transformation we're capable of, and starting to really embrace the journey that we've created, not just for ourselves as a species, but for this planet at this moment where we have become this, existential threat in some ways. We are this force that's transmuting so much energy on this planet, and we could have judgment on it, it's good or it's bad or things like this, but the reality is we are this radical force of nature that is causing major changes on this planet. And the nature never loses an opportunity to raise the vibration, raise the beauty, raise the intelligence of life with the next iteration. And so nature is, I think, just thrilled for the moment. I don't think she's suffering. I don't think there's a sense of, great loss, or this planet has been through so many iterations and transformations through extinctions, changes in climate, which happen every 7,000 years. We get pretty radical climate changes on the planet and things like this. So our humanistic view of like, there's great change happening right now and it's terrible and all this stuff is, we can feel sadness for the loss because there is so much loss going on, so much human loss right now. The death toll in our 25 to 55 years olds have never been so high. We've seen so much early death in the last few years. And it's really, something for us to collectively grieve. And in that grief, I think we are going to break open our hearts in a new way, and I become capable of life and love in a new fashion. And that's why I keep waking up in the morning and wanting to stay here, is curiosity of like, what the heck is that going to look like?
You mentioned at the retreat, wanting to die many times a day. Is that related to that there's so much grief going on, and there's death, literal death, happening in so many different levels, human, environmental. Is there a relationship between, that concept and what you talked about at the retreat? We've just been on it last weekend of, wanting to die many times a day. Do you want to sort of explore that, that sort of concept? It was fascinating, and I just want to go there because it was, from the outset, it's like, really? What do you mean? It's just...
Sounds morbid.
Totally.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, that's what's, anytime you look at agroecology in its grander forms, whether it be, biodynamics or regen or, the newer models that are out there like syntropic gardening and things like this, these things rely heavily on death life cycles to occur, to get vibrant depth of nutrients, depth of beauty, depth of biodiversity. There's a lot of dying that needs to happen. And in our own selves, I've gotten to witness that in hospice. In my work as a physician there, I was an associate medical director for a hospice for 4 years. And there's something so intense about, admitting 80 patients a week, year after year to die. And the beauty that comes out of those moments, just as somebody is letting go of death, is really unspeakable. You get to see the most unexpected rebirths happen. And the desire that I have in myself is to increasingly live a life and a lifestyle that allows me to die figuratively and energetically to all the things that I'm holding on to, so that I can have that rebirth process while I'm still in this body. Because it seems a shame to wait until the moment that I'm in my delirium and truly letting go of this biologic vessel to let go of the beliefs and restrictions and relationships that kept me in a pattern of behavior that wasn't perhaps my highest calling, my fullest potential. And to show up brighter and bigger every day, we have to keep letting go of the self-limiting beliefs and ideas and behaviors that we subconsciously slip into and have been deeply programmed by our social systems.
I just want to get back to changing. If you had any other is that a new concept for you? That, I mean, your experiences in hospitals and in your sort of, I guess, your conventional medical world, as it were, you experienced that. But is that concept of appreciating or wanting to die every day, is that a new thing for you, or has that just been, that's a deep-seated kind of a philosophy that you've been carrying with you?
That started pretty deeply in me about 15 years ago or something like that, but it's been accelerating every year since. And it takes on a different form, of course, every time you die, because you have something else to let go of, and something else is born in you in that next minute. And the long story of it is, my gosh, am I a frail psyche? Am I a heavily divided consciousness by my egoic fear, guilt, shame paradigms? Because the the moment you have a breakthrough, you get this just radical sense of freedom, this radical sense of buoyancy and levity. And then within minutes, your body starts to sense that you've hit another glass ceiling. You know, it's like, oh, I felt that thing for a minute. And then now I'm feeling a little bit more familiar in my body. So there's a little bit of relief about that of like, okay, I didn't completely self-destruct in ecstasy. But you are finding quickly those next levels of subconscious needs and codependencies that you have, arranged around yourself to palliate the fear of being alive and a belief that you're separate from nature.
Anything else that you've, in the last 11 months, 12 months, that, perspectives that have changed for you, I guess whether that be as a result of research or experience or, just perception, that you've just gone, holy shit, not that you might have had it wrong, but it's like, this is the next level. This is, I'm finding my true north, or, a whole world of something is opened up for you. I mean, I'm interested because given what I understand and see and sort of feel of your life, every day seems like another opportunity for expression of different things or exploring different things. So, I mean, a lot can happen in a 12-month period for you. But is there anything that sort of really stood out as, oh my God, that changed my course?
Yeah, the list is long. In that 12 months, I've spent almost the entire 12 months traveling. I've been home for about 15 days this year, and so the travel has taken me internationally, deep into Africa, India, Indonesia, South Asia, Bali. And so these trips have introduced me to extraordinary beings, both trees and humans, and being around the more wondrous, wisdom sources within nature. You are constantly in a changing sense of your own dimension, and I am compelled by the experience that you can feel like you're about the size of a grain of sand, and then the next moment you feel like you're the size of the cosmos itself, and so it's this extraordinary sensory capacity that we have of fields of energy that I think might be super unique to humans. Like we have a sensory vessel here that allows us to transit space-time in a very unique fashion with a vibrational experience that we would call feelings that I think is riveting for nature to watch us experience, because most of nature is not going to experience the life in which we do, the feelings in which this human vessel is capable of feeling. And so I think there's this deep intrigue, and certainly my world has opened up pretty radically, if you want to think about radical changes in my year, around this reality of non-human species among us. And the U.S. Senate is now deep in these hearings with our Department of Defense and Department of Energy, and revealing this 100-year program that's been going on deep in the U.S., Department of Energy, mostly around non-human technologies, UFOs, UAPs, all this stuff. But the implications, of course, are deep in the reality that we're actually working with other species. And so that's a disruptive thing. And yet I've been kind of shocked this year that even I was given an idea that this stuff was coming out before it hit the news. And I did a 3-hour podcast in preparation for the big first media hit to happen. And I just wanted to prepare whoever could listen to the idea that we do not need to fear intelligence. We need to instead wonder at feelings. Intelligence is a mental phenomenon, an intellectual phenomenon, and it is in service ultimately to life, and life is in pursuit of higher and higher capacities to see patterns, to recognize the beauty within patterns, and therefore witness nature. And when you witness something at the atomic physics level, it gets more real. It literally materializes in front of you when you witness something. And that's been proven out in the quantum physics realm and all this stuff. So this year has really shaped me deeply in my understanding of the concept that we have so reductionistically defined as love. This love frequency that we are capable when we see beauty, we create an entire sensory experience when we see beauty. And I think that is actually the true definition of love, is a sentient being in witness to beauty. And when you experience beauty, it does not give you just this like, oh, I'm in love feeling, or this little warm, fluttery feeling of I'm seen, or I see that. Instead, it's this whole body journey. And the things that really have changed me this year was kind of an introduction to grief in a much deeper level than I've ever experienced it. And I experienced that grief in the forests, actually, of South France. And in that experience, the message from the broader nature around me was very clear. This is what love feels like. And I just bawled for hours uncontrollably, holding onto this tree as it showed me deeper and deeper levels of what it truly full body feels like to have this. I don't know how I had that experience. It was, no drugs involved, no plant medicine involved. It was a nature immersion in pursuit of my own spiritual awareness. That was the intent that I set as I went into the forests of the St. Baume forest down there outside of Marseille in Toulon, France. I was in seeking my own feminine capacity to be alive, this archetype of the feminine vessel within me. And it was a shock and overwhelming to be introduced through that capacity within myself to this new experience of love. And in that, I think it's taken me months to even start to integrate that. And I don't know if I've even begun that, but to sit there and process this information in my body, I haven't recovered from the grief for sure. In fact, it just seems to get compounded every day that the earth lives right now. What's going on in Ukraine, what's going on in Syria, what's going on in Israel and Palestine and Gaza, what's frankly going on in the middle of the United States right now as our whole country goes into a ghost town. Our economy is collapsing. The cities are collapsing. Go to San Francisco and it's just devastating what kind of human decay we're in as a nation in the United States. Our healthcare is an utter disaster. We have 60 to 70% of corpses now are full of blood clots that have never been seen before, and we've just got this Holocaust level suffering and death going on this planet right now. There is a true genocide-like experience happening to the human race right now, and it goes beyond little tiny divisions of race. It's truly an entire race, an entire species has brought itself to its knees. We have 1 in 3 males infertile in the developed world. We have more than that in females probably at this point, certainly 1 in 4 with polycystic ovarian syndrome. We've got 50% of adults with prediabetes in most cities in the developed world now, including China and India and economies that you might not think so exposed to this modern toxicity. We are just in our hospice moment. And so when we talk about dying every day, you only have to look around with your heart open to feel the grief of the moment. And yet, damn it, if we don't all feel more alive and more real and more on purpose and more alert perhaps than we've ever felt before. And we're seeing people transform over the most extraordinarily simple interactions. The retreat held people in such a simple space. We brought 26 people together, and we did not want to let go of each other at the end of that 3 days because it was such a precious human experience. We all fell in love with each other. We all felt newly alive for it. I'd love to hear some of your take homes from it too. Just what is that last few days felt like in exiting something that forced our whole bodies to change. When we go through that level of physiologic exposure to new ideas and new vibrations and new beauty within ourselves, it's not subtle. Our bodies have to take a metabolic as well as emotional, psychosocial, transformation period there, so the integration can be challenging. What's your experience been?
My integration happened. Well, my challenge happened on that first Saturday morning.
That's right.
I was crook as a dog. I felt hungover. And I'm literally today being, 5 days later, 6 days later, because tomorrow's Friday, was the first day that I felt kind of normal. And you'd mentioned the meditation we did on the Friday may have, which was fascinating in itself, may have brought up some feeling of dizziness and vertigo. But for me, it was just like, I think my body was just purging a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Which it obviously needed to do. So that was a physical reaction. And the breath work was, you mentioned grief, and I remember to ask you a question. The dichotomy or the balance between grief and love and why that came up. But my experience with the breath work was that of grieving my 6-year-old self for the perfect human that it was, and then life and experience erodes that, and it was, I was bawling for that child, the inner child, that 6-year-old perfect being, and I've got a picture of myself on the back of my camera when I was 6, so just a reminder to be compassionate to myself, that as I've got to my age now, with the influences of life and family and world and ups, downs, ins and outs, that I'm not that, I'm physically, and I'm kind of not thinking like that child anymore, but that is me, and I that child is alive. I've got to make sure I keep that inner child alive, so that I got to remember that that's actually the pure expression of me, and all the other stuff is kind of, it's not that it's not my fault, but I've got to forgive myself for getting to this point. Not that I'm a bad person, I don't think, but it's like the world just does shit to you, and some's good, some's bad. I'm blessed. I got to say, I led a blessed life, and I look at what happens in the world and in all its different levels of grief, that others experience, and I'm very grateful that I've got this far, and as and healthy and everything. But the overwhelming experience was forgiveness. My inner child forgiving my current self for its fuck ups.
Yeah.
It's like, did you represent me, the 6-year-old, very well? You did okay. I forgive you for the sort of the journey you've been on. Not that it's been bad, but it was almost like, it was always going to happen, because that's life. That's the journey we're on. And the other overwhelming sense was of compassion to that inner child that we kind of forget about. And we don't allow that playfulness to come back. I got goosebumps just thinking about it. At that age, everything's wonderful. It should be. But it's also at that age is formative, isn't it? Things happen to lots of kids. Things happen to us from, 0 to 6, 7, 8, that first 7-year cycle, which are formative for the rest of our life. We attach meaning to events. It creates filters. It creates, behaviours that, and it's all about protection, isn't it? It's a protective mechanism when you're young. Someone says you're stupid, and then you think you're stupid, so you do things that either reinforce that or protect you from that, and that we carry that all the way through, and then you're 70 and that's still a protective mechanism, and how we remove that, how we actually, back to our how do we kill it? It's probably not the right word, but how do we die that protective sheath that we create when we're kids for a really good reason? How do we put that to a side and it die and then rebirth without that sense of guilt and fear and shame? That'll
take a lifetime. That'll take a rest of it.
That all came up for me. So that's a long answer to your question, but
it's a perfect answer. And I think the thing that I'm seeing in that is the truth that we all have to walk now, which is, by age 6, you were a fully sovereign, embodied being. You knew how to feed yourself. You knew how to do all the things that we don't let 6-year-olds do. But had there been an erosion of support systems, at 6 years old, you actually have the faculties to fish and to hunt and to actually, create your reality, create shelter. I was building forts all over the place by the time I was 6 years old. There was innate knowingness on how to create for your own provision. And then steadily the world, programs us into forsaking that sovereign being so deeply and putting everything else in front of the priority of giving reverence and sovereignty to that child within us. That is a complete being. To say child is not to say something incomplete. It's a fully established being that's totally embodied a soul. And Khalil Gibran, 100 years ago, one of the most brilliant minds of the 20th century, was asked, how should we parent? And he had the most simple, brilliant answer, which is you should strive every day to think more like the child near you and make absolutely sure you never make that child think like you. And in that simple message, he was basically saying the only time you've had wisdom is in that 6-year-old moment. And you need to strive the rest of your life to get back to that wisdom, that level of self-awareness, that level of magic, because the 6-year-old is truly creating its environment. We are disempowered by the time we're 16 years old. That 10-year period between 6 and 16, we are frail beings by the time we're 16. The world has given us so many insecurities to believe in. We've been beat down in so many weird ways. And so the journey back to that childlike magical capacity to create your reality needs to become a societal focus very quickly if we are to move into our true calling, which is to create from this incredible vibration of love that perhaps begins in the vibration of grief, recognizing how much we have put in front of our own sovereignty to be socially acceptable, to be successful, to be wealthy, whatever it is that we've been in pursuit of. And there should be a deep grief that hits us when we realize how distant that little child is within us and how frighteningly far we have fallen from the wisdoms we used to hold.
Well, I was a mess. But it was good.
It's perfect.
Yeah, well,
it's a perfect mess,
perfect,
when you start to feel that. And the beautiful thing that you said in there was a word that's so critical to all of us right now, which is forgiveness. Mm. Recognize the fall and then perhaps apologize to self. Mm. I'm so sorry that I put so much in front, ahead of you. I'm so sorry I've been so irreverent to you. I'm so sorry I have created so much that didn't matter in the name of self-sacrifice or at the cost of self-sacrifice. I'm sorry about that. But then now that I'm seeing the process, I realize it's a perfect journey and I forgive that thing. And that forgiveness that you came to this weekend is what we all must strive for, because in the forgiveness, then we're tripped into the next portion of the vibration of love, which was that ecstatic state of that we are so familiar with when we say the word love. And so that it's only in that dive into the grief, the apology, the forgiveness that we really enter into this beautiful experience of acceptance that leads to that vibration of just glory, 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 glory.
And that leads us to the realization of our authentic self, right? Like that was a big one for me as well. Just the science around the frequency of authenticity.
Yeah.
Was 400 times that of love. Which that was like, really? Fuck,
that's disruptive.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I thought, that love was up there in terms of frequency and, our deep resonance of self in that state of love, which getting back to the extraterrestrials is what they can't. That's the we've both read this Ring Cedars of Russia and Anastasia, and that's the messaging there is that's what they want. That's what they can't get. They're trying to work out how they actually see the beauty, create the beauty, feel the love, because there's no species out there that can do that, and they just can't get their head around it. Maybe that's why I don't know. Interbreeding, that's a whole nother scenario, but
they're trying for it. They want it, and all of nature wants to feel, right? And the interesting thing is that a tree has such exquisite capacity to feel. It's been shown, The Secret Life of Plants and all these books that have been written recently. And when you do neuro sensing on plants, they can feel the entry of their caretaker from large distances. And so I can't remember the study, I think it was 2 kilometers or 20 kilometers or something like that. But as the caretaker comes within this sphere of reality to that plant, it vibrates at this higher expectation of being seen again by its caretaker. And so if a house plant is sensing at a distance of 2 kilometers, what are we capable of sensing? And so I think as we start to get introduced to more and more intelligence beings all around us, that will be the interesting journey into helping share that with them. Because I think there's going to be fear, guilt, shame paradigms thrown around all this stuff, and fear of alien attack, or all things are going to be thrown at us shortly here. But I think that we need to remember that life itself is coalescing to be seen, whether it be microbes in a petri dish, soil systems, earthworms, trees. Nature is coalescing more and more biodiversity at every single millionth of a second, so that more and more beings can be seen in their beauty. And if our unique technology as humans is to see beauty, as we get introduced to this next level of reality in the 4th dimension, 5th dimension, whatever we're going to get exposed to, we need to be immediately in our highest calling, which is see the beauty, see the beauty, see the beauty. And it's hard because you're going to have to deal with the other feelings that you have, which might be fear, which might be a sense of shame. It might be a sense of inadequacy. It might be a whole kinds of things triggered. So feel all of that as fast as you can and as thoroughly and deep as you can, so you can get to the beauty, so that you can get to that incredible reverence of, oh my gosh, there are species that have been here longer than us, that have been nursemating us into reality. And if they wanted to kill us, they would have done that a long time ago, because their technologies of destruction are much greater than ours. But they've actually been giving us technologies perhaps to help nursemate our pathway towards a higher level of awareness, higher level of all of this, because they're so curious to see what we can do in a community with them. They want to sit across a meal perhaps and feel loved, because just as the tree can do it for me, can I do that for another being from some far-flung cosmos? And so this is a trippy reality that we're in, that the U.S. government is sitting here telling the world that, yeah, sorry, we've been working with extraterrestrials for 100 years. Sorry we didn't mention it, but it was like we were all kind of afraid to mention it. We didn't think anybody could handle it, and all this weird, justifications coming out, which of course are all going to be egoic. And it's not surprising perhaps that in the first 100 years of our relationships as governments to these other species, our first instinct was, we need to use all this technology for military, strength, because God knows somebody else could take it from, take life from our children or whatever it is. So in our fear for our children, our first instinct is military. But we are getting to a point right now, I think, when we're realizing, wow, we're simply destroying ourselves as a species. We need to get to a wholeness of species, wholeness of human, where we birth this new humanity, where when we see opportunities to learn, when we see opportunities to experience new things within the cosmos, we immediately start to repurpose that towards our art, towards our creativity. How do we use these technologies for free energy so that we're not all rushing around trying to make a living? Because if there's free energy, then there's free food. If energy is infinite, there's infinite capacity to create with nature within these food systems. If food and energy are infinite, there's no reason anybody's going to sit in a cubicle and type on a keyboard. That's why AI is here, to do that stupid stuff for us. We are ready to step into our magnum opus, which is be a creative force capable of sensing the world and feeling everything. And in that, we will jump to this next expression of genetics, of biology, of all kinds of things, I believe. And I've seen my patients do it in death. I'm pretty convinced we can do it in life.
You mentioned being seen before, and something that came up for me at the retreat, given the conversations that were being had, was how do we ensure our children feel seen? Because there's lots going on at the moment. Clearly, they're not feeling seen, so that triggers a whole lot of stuff that is feels pretty problematic societally at the moment. What can we as parents, as family members, what do we have to think about or do to, because it's pretty important, yeah?
Yeah, our Farmers Footprint Australia team is getting a pretty awesome witness of this right now. So we've got Arlo and Jonah going on this incredible trip with their parents. They're 7 and 12, I think, are their ages. And if I've got that wrong, boys, forgive me on that. But you guys are two incredible men that are finding themselves very quickly in a 4-month journey with their parents who decided that they would leave home, leave the whole concept of home, start going on the road in a gypsy-like lifestyle in an RV to go find and visit farmers all over this country that desperately need to be seen, desperately need to be reconnected to society. And so the Farmers Footprint vehicle, with all of its capacity and the love that's in that vehicle, with this beautiful family from Blair and the rest of the crew that's around the Farmers Footprint team, being witness to this journey. But these two boys have learned how to fish, have learned how to hunt, have learned how to, trust their own instincts in nature. And just in the last couple of days and getting back here for these events, they were given the opportunity to step back into school. And the contrast that they are experiencing right now between the classroom and how much they've learned in just 4 months in the face of nature is a really, beautiful thing. And I was blessed to watch that in my children as they grew up. My children are now in their mid-20s and, are living pretty amazing lives now. But they finished high school. They tested out of high school at 14 because we had homeschooled them all the way through. And their amazing mother had the instinct to keep them in nature every day. And one of the main things that we really turned out to be almost the only thing that we held space for in the homeschooling environment was the daily nature journal. And they were required to go out and sit in nature alone for 30 minutes and see something, draw it or depict it or write something down that they're feeling about that thing. So we have these amazing journals for my kids from age maybe 7 or 8 all the way through to 14 of just their experiences within nature. And the speed at which these children reached intellectual capacity defied logic, because by 14 they both tested out of high school, went to community college in the United States. It's a kind of an adult learning environment where you don't have to deal with all the social goo-ha of universities, and you get to dive into your subjects and you apply yourself quickly to get these skills. It's usually like young people or adults that are training into specific new fields or changing direction, careers, whatever it is. So they're very applied learning environment. So these 14-year-olds go into that environment and they're immediately rising towards the top of their coursework in the face of people who are 10, 20 years older than them. And they found great camaraderie with that older group and have still done that there. And, my son is married, and his spouse, he met his wife right at entering college, and when he was 14, she was of course quite a bit older, and not only was he intellectually advanced, his social peer capacity was at that 10-year kind of thing that he was intellectually as well. So this fear that we need to socialize our kids, and so therefore we need to torture them with school, is a not accurate reality. Like, nature will teach a child socialization skills that no group of 25 10-year-olds are going to teach each other. I think when did we think that was normal social realms? Like, we need to put kids all together at the same age and the same emotional turmoil and see how they do together, and that must be socialization. No. Socialization is a child sitting with an elder in a boat being shown how to tie a fly on the end of a hook, and that child will never forget that moment. They will not forget what it felt like to be them. They won't forget what it smelled like in the air. They won't forget the warmth of the sun on their neck. Those kids are being shaped by nature so potently, and they are being socially intelligent as much as they are intellectually intelligent in that moment, because they are now communing not just with somebody their age. They're communing with multi-generational exposures to the humans, but they're also being in commune with the fish itself, with the tree above itself, the sun itself. We have forgotten how potent learning is when it's experiential. And we have dumbed it down so intensely by creating systems of education instead of learning. Look up the definition of education and blow your mind. It literally says it's programming of a child versus learning experientially, which you never forget. I don't remember a darn thing that I learned even in med school. I don't remember any of it. And what I remember is the experiential learning at the bedside of a patient dying, and the drugs I administered at that moment, and the things that happened in the next moments, and then the tears of their family members when they left. And those are the things that have ultimately stuck with me as true memory, true knowingness of what's real and what to act from in my life. And so we have this fear that we won't be enough until we are really seen by nature, and then we find out that we are beyond imagination, our capacity to create, our capacity to be sovereign in our own selves, and therefore compassionate towards one another instead of empathic towards one another. Big differences between those two words as well, and I think we've dumbed down compassion for this emphasis recently on being emotionally available to each other. I think emotions are a dumbed down version of feelings. Emotions are a thin bandwidth of definition of complex waveforms that are true feelings. That's why I was so stunned to find grief in the wave of love, and realize I actually can't get to the ecstatic state of love and the creative force that is within sensuality, sexuality, or human creativity and art. Can't get there unless I go through the grief. And so these narrow definitions of emotions have eliminated our capacity to metabolize or experience through the true, full, complex waveforms of feeling that humans are capable of being. And so we need to release our education back towards experiential learning. We need to release our empathy for true compassion. We need to release our emotions for true feelings to emerge.
Do you think if we track back to you gathered together a group of social issues facing juveniles, teenagers at the moment? There's shootings, there's somewhat gender confusion, or I'm not even sure how one should or needs to or can describe that. Do you think we would see, and then variations and all that, bullying in school, even that kind of level? Do you think we would see a distinct lack of connection with nature generally with those group of individuals? Is that, kind of feels like that might be the case, but is there studies that have been done? It makes perfect sense to me, given, what you've just said.
What these younger people are experiencing.
Yeah, what they're not experiencing.
Yeah. Tons of studies have been done in the effect of screens, for example, on children's psyche, and it was quite a long time back, probably 6 or 7 years ago. No, it was even longer ago, 10 years ago. I was with one of my best friends, William Vitalis, and we were at this amazing training experience up in New Jersey. It was a Russian group that had come over to train us on how to utilize these energy cameras to photograph or video the human energy field and understand its relationship to pathology and disease. So we were going through this mind-bending, crazy experience. Like, this Russian team had so much extraordinary data, and the cameras were so crazy to work with, bending my sense of reality deeply. This would have been around 2012, 13. And these little groups that had come to train here were so diverse. I'd never been around such diverse things. There was crazy hippie energy healers sitting next to 3-star generals, sitting next to, it was unbelievable cross section of humans that were in these little sessions. There was only 16 of us that weekend, training for 4 days around this science. And the stories the general told me, now actually laughing at myself, because in hindsight he told me everything that I would hear this year, and I just now realizing I didn't have ears to hear it or mind to. That's really interesting. Actually, that just all came back to me. I haven't thought about this in a long time, but the reason why this is all coming back to me about that New Jersey experience was the first time that William and I witnessed. We were sitting in a busy restaurant late that night and watched a group of teenage girls come out of a nearby restaurant, and they were probably waiting for rides or something, I don't know what, but they all congregated right in front of this huge plate glass window that we were sitting in front of. But because of the separation of the window, they were unaware of us. And so you get almost like this fly on the wall experience of watching these 14-year-old girls all conglomerated together, all clearly in some sort of social clique or awareness of one another. And yet, for the first time, we witnessed beings only looking at each other through their cell phones. And it was just this awe that settled into both of us, and we watched for a full half an hour as not a single one of these young girls looked into the face of another being. And they would look at one another through the lens of the camera for a moment, take a picture or a selfie, but they would not make eye contact without the interface of this lens. And it was just such a potent manifestation of a species that has been too afraid to look into each other's eyes for eons. We have created technology now to further protect ourselves from the risk of looking into another's eyes, because if you look into somebody else's eyes for 2 minutes, you will fall in love. And if that's the case, then that's damn scary to look into somebody else's eyes, because there's so much that comes in the feeling of love that might begin with grief. And there might be a deep loneliness that you start to feel within yourself as you stare into somebody else's eyes, because you start to really feel for a moment. You realize your condition is lonely because you are not being seen. And so you look away for that little ache of loneliness in you, lest it might grow. And so we now have a generation of, 2 generations of kids that are growing up now behind these screens, further, separated from the ability to be truly seen by another being. But in some ways, I don't give up hope, because this is part of the necessary journey. And as we see this generation, truly melting our previous boundaries of what we thought was, human life and human behavior, they are melting it all down. And so we are, gender that you mentioned is a super important one to mention, I think, because I think it's a very big stress right now for parents, grandparents, to watch these young children by the age of 5 or 6 starting to express that they don't feel either male or female. And there's a deep fear that they're being programmed with that socially. And I think there's probably some layers of that, but the reality is at the biologic level that that's actually true, is that they are coming out of the womb without that distinct masculine, feminine identity because of the biologic stress we've put them under genetically. Tragically, but I guess that's just a human judgment that we call it tragic. The reality of genetics is that once injured, there's an accumulation of trauma over a lifetime that's passed on to your children, and it's passed on epigenetically for the first 3 generations, and meaning that my great grandchildren will epigenetically know all of my stress, but their children, that epigenetic stress pattern will be baked into the very sperm and ovum of their parents. And so in the 4th generation, it moves from an epigenetic, meaning very malleable, plastic capacity to remember my trauma, to an inevitability of knowing my trauma. They have now embodied my trauma in the 4th generation. And so the embodied trauma of 4 generations past has put so much stress on the endocrine system of fetuses that the nuclei within their brains are not forming in the same way, and so they do not differentiate into the masculine, feminine archetypes and belief systems and all of this, ultimately because the biology has shifted. When you put a human organism under stress, the male of that species will convert testosterone to estrogen. The female of the species will convert estrogen to testosterone. And so a species under persistent stress will go into a unisex expression. And if you do that for 3 consecutive generations of this deep endocrine trauma from microplastics, chemical herbicides, pesticides, those are the 3 ingredients for dissolving gender. And we started that big time in the 1960s. And so here we are, 25-year cycles of each generation. And so 75 years after the Green Revolution in the 1950s, with the chemical introduction into our food system, here we are with no gender. And so this is the inevitable biologic consequence of a toxic lifestyle of the 1950s as we came out of World War II and decided we weren't going to eat real food. Processed food was the new wealth and the new ease and convenience of being human. And so here, we didn't know it at the time, but we were programming our children, our great-grandkids 75 years later, to be biologically expressing that cumulative stress for the last 75 years. And so in this state of non-gender, they actually are fulfilling the prophecies of this time from indigenous wisdoms that have said that in this epoch, somewhere after 2012, at the end of the Mayan calendar, there would be a complete dissolution of the human models of existence, and we would be birthing into a union of the masculine and feminine. And in that union of the masculine and feminine, we would be truly going into a state of bliss, this new capacity. And so, while on one hand, we should be in horror over what's happened to that generation and biological consequences that they're facing, but on the flip side, we should be in awe and gratitude that this generation of children was willing to step into a moment to fulfill the prophecy that we will end the imbalance of the masculine archetype of humanity. The Achuar tribe, one of the oldest, wisdoms in South America, the Achuar have told us that in this time, the wing of the condor will open, and the humanity has two wings, the eagle and the condor. We've been flapping that one eagle wing, with the masculine wing out for generations or for eons, literally flying in circles of behavior. Empire rise, empire fall, empire rise, empire fall, and the egoic male, wounded masculine kind of expression. And now suddenly the second wing of the condor opens, and it is said that for the first time, humanity will fly straight. That was prophesied for thousands of years about the moment we're in, and we created herbicides, pesticides, and microplastics to maybe achieve that. And so it's so weird that the most ridiculous, toxic, poisonous stuff that we do, nuclear war, all of this stuff, is the stress that we need to finally grow up, finally get out of our shattered state of egoic brokenness and back to our 6-year-old realities, back to this potent creative force that is energetically has the capability of feeling, and therefore transmitting the frequency of love and all of its complexity out into the universe. And we have species from all over the cosmos, it looks like, that are paying attention to this moment. Just as the Achuar knew it was coming, so did perhaps all of these other species that are now putting so much energy into this moment and so much curiosity into what we are capable of creating as we move into our full childlike, godlike state of capacity to create from the real state of feeling.
So we have created, I guess, the physical, quite literally, physical transformation to that, let's call it balance, or that unisex kind of situation, which is definitely a biological transformation. Is that where it stops? Like, is not the definition of gender significant with an overlay of balance? Is that not what we're trying to, whatever the perfect kind of iteration of a human is? It feels like what's happening now is kind of fucking it up a bit. Like, there's a physical union. But is that kind of where's it headed? Because then don't we need the yin and the yang, reproduction, progression of the species, evolution from a physical point of view? I don't know.
That's baked into the law of nature itself, unfortunately. Yeah. So the natural law is a space of fascination for me, but just launched a new nonprofit called the Institute of Natural Law, and it's working on expanding our understanding of the political philosophy of natural law to become a much more collective understanding of the biologic underpinnings and the true physics underpinnings of the laws of nature, so that we can start to design socioeconomic, sociopolitical systems within these laws of nature. And the United States intended to be the first country to do this. In our Declaration of Independence 300 years ago, nearly 250 years ago, was penned by Benjamin Franklin. I think was probably got credit for this line because he had studied Confucius and natural law so deeply. But he penned the line that the United States would be the first modern nation to be ruled by the laws of nature. And so it was intended to do that. And then added to that line was "and divine law," which was the divine rights that the royalty claimed for thousands of years that allowed them to do all kinds of atrocities in the name of God, and that their God was more intelligent than other gods and or more big or whatever, more righteous. And so we broke the United States in our very Declaration of Independence because we added an egoic reality to natural law, and we shattered our potential. And so therefore, 250 years later, our empire is collapsing as it should. We are going to rebirth out of that as the United States, I think, very quickly. And I think we can start to participate in a global community in a different way. Instead of a hegemony, I think we can actually be what we have been recently, which is this creative epicenter. And I think the reason the United States holds that capacity is because we did get a lot right in this natural law thing. There's so much rights and focus of the individual's capacity to be a sovereign, and that's what got us as far as we did get in 250 years. And with this next iteration, when we purify that sovereignty within natural law and get rid of the separation of God and nature that's written into those documents, and realize that nature is the expression of God, and they are inseparable, and therefore the immutable laws of nature are God, and that is the original 10 commandments. And in those 10 commandments is pretty interesting. The first one is essentially that every living thing is sovereign, and in its sovereignty it holds the law of attraction. It will hold to itself, and in the law of attraction it then has the capacity for witnessing polarity. I am this, you are that. And in the polarity, then it's gender and generation that comes out of that. And so in capacity to witness self completely and embodied, we then attract to ourselves that which we can create with. And so the masculine and feminine at the gender level is coded into life in so many ways. We do have pretty amazing examples that doesn't need to be fixed over a single lifetime of an organism. There's many fish species that Arlo was just teaching me. His 12-year-old is always the best way to learn is sit around with kids. And he was teaching me all this past weekend about the fact that there's a number of fish that will all begin female. And then as they grow, they all begin male. As they grow and get to a certain size, then they become female. And so it's a beautiful example of that flexibility within nature without the dissolution of the phenomenon of reproduction. And so I think that's where we're going to go as a species. We need to go through this period of time where our children teach us that rejection of the old models of the masculine and the wounded masculine, and therefore the wounded feminine that would be injured by that masculine. That sad reality needs to come to an end, and we need to find sovereignty of self and the marriage of masculine and feminine within ourselves. And once we do that, then we get to express a new sexuality and a new gender that does not, preclude the capacity to enter into relationship to bear children. And I'm watching my daughter and her generation do that in spades. My son, just a few years older than her, is more in the traditional relationship and everything else. And so it's very interesting. And then my grandson, who's 16 years old, his generation in high school right now, astonishing right now as to seeing what, the level of gender dissolution at that level. It's unusual for a child to identify heterosexual at that age right now. And so that generation is going to start to show us that, yes, I don't need to be told I'm this or that, but I can be the whole. And from that, I'm going to choose this life path of love. And I'm going to love in this way, and I'm going to partner in this way. They're going to teach us. They're going to show us what we do when we stop, with this rigid fear that we must be one or the other, or we must be this form of masculinity or whatever it is. And for that, we will heal that wounded masculine. And I think we will see some of the most extraordinary examples of masculinity and femininity in the next, few decades here, because the healing is going to happen through this journey. We will heal the wound, and we will move towards some new expression of human love and human creativity and human sensuality, so that we can feel more completely at all stages of life. And it makes a lot of sense to me that we would be drawn to one form of intimacy or sensuality when we're 10, 15, 20 years old before we're interested in having children, and then that would morph. And for our period of time, 20s and 40s, it would, it administer itself some other way in our biology. And then after this, wonderful gift of menopause for males and females, both going through menopause in our late 40s, early 50s, what a blessing to be released from the expectation of procreation. And now sexuality, sensuality becomes a whole nother expression. And I carry a deep wound within me for my grandfather's generation. He came to that realization in his late 40s. And his realization of changing his sexuality was so embarrassing and so buried by his children and his contemporaries that I didn't know as his grandchild, I took care of him into his old age, and my kids knew him as a great-great-grandfather or a wonderful great-grandfather. And that reality for him is so tragic that he died unknown, unseen for his sexuality that simply matured or changed at a point when he was done procreating. And there was a new desire for him to express love. And it was so embarrassing. And yet then, my kids' generation comes along and they have so much freedom in that their great-grandfather lacked in his stage. So what a blessing that we are moving towards a sovereign expression of gender and sexuality. What a tragic thing that our children are carrying that much trauma. What a tragic thing that our children are being so unsupported in this because we're so afraid of this change as their parents, as their grandparents and aunts and uncles. We need to have grace on these children, understand that their biology is expressing this. This isn't like social brainstorming of Russians, which is something I hear a lot of, like, no, that is not what this is, people. This is a true biologic shift of our species. And there are social ramifications that aren't pretty and are messy and can be manipulated and can lead to deeper wounds of insecurity and all kinds of things if we keep treating it like it's a disease. We need to embrace these children as to who they are right now. And whoever they want to express right now is absolutely perfect, because they need to reteach us what does the 6-year-old of today, carrying the cumulative trauma of the last 100 years of chemical realities, teaching us about what it looks like to be truly embraced by nature instead of engineering ourselves out of that nature.
Well, that's something that came up for me at the retreat. Was you said, I can't remember quite how you phrased it, but you mentioned, we've got to relearn or re-engage with the ritual of healing our ancestral trauma, and that really got me thinking. And there's epigenetic kind of ancestral trauma. We've done work many years ago with a number of people, and the understanding of 7 generations back, and we carry that in all sorts of ways.
Mm-hmm.
It's trauma, and we can sort of step back and correct things somewhat through different methods, but which it all just fascinates me. But how can we, at any stage of our lives, and I guess in a state of awareness, help? What is a ritual for healing that generational trauma? How can we be the ones that do our ancestors, dare I say, the favour of releasing that, of healing that? Can it be done?
It can, very excitingly, all healing can be done. That's super exciting reality, is all healing can be done. You can heal absolutely anything. And in that healing of anything, we reach this new capacity for creation at the genetic level. And so the tools that are being used right now for this started really in the 1960s and 70s with that kind of, dawning of the age of Aquarius, as it was termed by that generation. In that time, people were becoming aware of energetic profiles that were coded beneath the genetics. And so we started to understand how acupuncture was working for 9,000 years. How was Reiki and these other traditional healing arts of energy field medicine working for 9,000 years? Why was that working? It's because the emotional trauma, because we are unable to feel, instead we get, block things up in emotions. That energy of blocked emotions starts to change the energy field, which then leaves room for the genetics to be confused and be chaotic in its expression. And then the biology then follows suit in this traumatized, reality that we live in. If you change the energy field beneath the genes, then the genes do change. And so when I went through med school in 1992, we fully thought genes were just coded. Like, we just thought that was the template, the blueprint. You couldn't change them. by the end of that decade, we knew that genes were changing all the time, and so it's a super plastic situation, and they're swapping information back and forth, changing. I'm a different human being than I was born, and I've rebirthed myself. Every single cell in my body has been rebirthed with a new genetics every 7 years, and my gut turns over every 3 days. So, some of your cell populations have turned over thousands of times in your lifetime, some, a couple dozen by the end of a lifetime. So we are completely new, and we can be renewed faster than even the 7-year cycle if we change the energy beneath the genetics. And so NET, NEAT, emotion code therapy, all these, acronyms have been thrown out there for all these different specialties that are kind of the nouveau versions of Reiki and acupuncture and Ayurveda and all these 9,000-year-old techniques, Qigong, Tai Chi, blah, 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 blah. It goes on and on. But for 9,000 years, these groups of indigenous people, in their wisdom of connection to nature, knew that they could heal anything. In the last 100 years, or perhaps a few hundred years of colonialism, in our separation from nature, we forgot the power to clear trauma. And so why is it happening now? Because we don't have rituals of clearing trauma for our children. They do not have the ability to clear trauma because we didn't teach them, because we did not learn, because we just started to rely on education instead of learning. And in our dedication to educational systems, we stopped being experiential learners and seeing from nature that everything transforms and transmutes all the time. So we need to move back into this capacity for rituals that can transform. And the ones we used this weekend in the retreat that you were at, breath work, meditation, which is just to say silence. I was raised in a place where I was told that I should pray all the time. In hindsight, 50 years later, I feel, my gosh, what a foolish thing to be told is that I need to talk to God all the time. Wouldn't it be more effective if I just listened to God all the time, right? Wouldn't that be the right instructions? But I was just told that I should just tell God everything all the time. Tell him how I feel. Tell him what I'm, tell him that I want this thing, or this thing's bad, or, whatever it is. Like,
or asking for stuff.
Ask for this stuff or whatever. Like, what is we got the whole paradigm reversed. Listen to nature and it will show you the abundance that it's capable of giving you. And it's trying to give you abundance all the time. And in its abundance, it will nurture you into a new state of being, a new reality, a new genetic code, everything else. And so we are on our path, whether we want to or not, or aware or not, or think we are or not. We are on our path to a complete rebirth as a species, and that might occur on our deathbed as we let go of these bodies, and that's okay too. It's okay to die, and it's okay if our species goes extinct. Because in our wake, we will leave great evidence of intelligence that can reinstate itself in its next iteration on this planet. Selfishly, I kind of want to stay and play because I'm just a curious being, and I feel those moments of tingly capacity to create in this new genetics, this new reality, this new sensuality of being alive fully and sucking the marrow out of life itself. So I'm just so invigorated by the pain of grief and the ecstasy of creativity that comes out of love. And I want to feel all that. I want to see all that still. And I realize I've been in a muted version of reality for 50 years. And I hope that in the next half a century, I'm enlivened in new ways. And that's why I'm dedicated to this effort to die more frequently during the day so that I can be that more invigorated life form.
Can you stick around? Stick around for another 50, 60, please.
I'm curious to, but I'm also very willing not to. It's basically I have absolutely no fear of death at this point. An absolute just sense of joy of whatever my highest self is planning is going to be spectacular. I can be aware of those plans on some levels, but I kind of like the curiosity of the unknown. I love waking up being curious like a 6-year-old would be of what am I going to create today? And I think if I keep waking up as a 6-year-old, I'm not going to age and the way people expect me to. I might look like I'm aging, and I'm going to do that so that nobody expects me to do anything anymore. And so I'm going to show you what a grandpa looks like, so you think that you don't look to me to do your dirty work anymore. But I'm going to give you the appearance of age as I become more and more childlike, and I'm going to live in an ecstatic state of existence if I do my work right. So,
Blair's giving us the nod, and I'm conscious that some delicious food's been left there for us, or at least for you. Blair, we're just finishing. Do you want to just nestle in here? And I want to give you what's Farmers Footprint Australia doing at the moment. What are we doing tonight? Why are you doing it? What's the kind of the thing? We'll do it. Snuggle in. How about you two sit here? No, you sit here. You two have a chat. I'll step out. Come on. You sit here. He's got food. Sit here.
Oh, you're sitting there.
Yeah, no, you sit there, and you sit there. Just do a.
We've got.
Give it a plug. What's happening tonight? I won't spoil it, and also the retreat that I had the pleasure of going to on the weekend was mind blowing, and where you're taking that, because if you don't, that'd be rude. You need
That would be rude. Mm-hmm. I meant to speak to the retreat. The idea behind that was to bring people together and to create some catalyst for change, because there's a lot of people out there which need to find their way, and that's a beautiful way and a beautiful expression to build a safe container for people to express themselves and find new parts of themselves and heal and come through that and be bigger, more beautiful creatures when they go back to their families and their communities and their workplaces. And if that can reflect into our farming communities and our stakeholders in the food systems, then I think we can potentially see some beautiful movement and some reparation, because we come back to being in healthy relationship.
I talked some about your boys on this podcast and just how much they can teach us in the ways in which you guys are now living your lives on the road with farmers all over the place. And then these boys are learning within nature instead of schoolrooms, and contrasting their experience of just explosion of curiosity and passion in the last 4 months back into the classroom this week. And just that experience of smashing back into a technologic education system instead of an engaged learning system of life and nature. And so they're going to enjoy listening to this podcast because they get featured pretty strong. But I would recommend that you guys actually get Arlo and Jonah back on here, because I think having a podcast with those kids following you guys will go on your next adventure here for another 6 months or whatever. But when you get back here with Charlie in another year or something, get these kids in front of these microphones and let them tell you a bit about their life, because we were talking about Charlie's experience of witnessing his 6-year-old self at the retreat this weekend. Mm-hmm. And that was the deep experience he had that took him towards his own healing that he needed this weekend. So each of us are finding this reemergence of our childlike aspects, and witnessing your two boys right in the midst of their most transformational ages, 7 and 12. They're making these dramatic changes at 7 years old. We're kind of stepping out of the awe magic to more of an awareness of our capacity to create our reality instead of just experience the reality. And at 12, we're going through this huge hormonal shifts and everything else of reality, and we're becoming beings that we weren't just a few months ago. So I think being witness to those boys would be potent on this podcast, because ultimately it's a study of passion. Mm-hmm. Those kids are passionate about what they have learned in the last 4 months, and it's infectious. And I haven't wanted to fish in 25 years, and suddenly I want to go fishing with Arlo, And so
he's actually fishing right now.
I'm sure he is, because that boy has found his passion.
So I very much doubt it. It's been such a beautiful journey to see through their eyes, because we get, at my age, you get a bit jaded. You've seen a lot, you've done a lot, but then to experience what I would say is, what's the right word for it? For me to see something and just go, oh yeah, that's kind of beautiful, but then see it through their eyes with that wonder and that newness and that wanting to go further and dive deeper into it and find out more about it. While I was just kind of blasé from, it's like having that experience all the time just brings so much to this trip that I didn't expect.
What have they taught you?
Sense of wonder, without that experience of to tap into that ever-present joy that is available to us all the time, but we find a myriad of ways to distract ourselves from it. That sense of unconditional love is probably what permeates my relationship with those boys now, which previously I didn't really acknowledge or understand it fully. So the gift that they've given me by going on this experience together is far outweighs whatever I try and give those guys. You know, I'm just stewards of these beings, you know, showing up in these little flesh suits and expressing themselves. So yeah, it's been an honor.
It is, and it gets us to what is Farmers Footprint and how does it differentiate itself from all of the other chatter and the regenerative movement and everything else. And you mentioned the word that's become kind of our true north, I think, which is relationship. It's a reconciliation of relationship between humans and our earth. Humans and ourselves is the first step of that. And so a little bit deeper on kind of how you're achieving that. What are the avenues of impact that Farmers Footprint uses to achieve that sense of awareness?
Yeah, I think that sits in the heart of what we've finally realised of the work we need to do and the most appropriate work we need to do. How we do it, I think we're unpacking those potentials by, you know, the potential of bringing a large amount of people together, which is what's happening this weekend. Like, what happens when we do that? What happens when we have a myriad and diversity of perspectives thrown at a big group of people, and then we move them and we get them to cohere together and sing together? And what can we generate to resonate in their after experience? And then what happens when we do it in a tight container? And all of that is trying to bring people back into relationship with each other, to themselves, in that deep work that we can do in retreats, and then ultimately to that realization with nature itself, with the cosmos. Like we've been sort of indoctrinated into a way of life which is out of sync with the rhythms of nature, with the beauty of the cosmos. So I think, as much as that doesn't sound like a farming initiative, when it comes back to it, if we're able to do that with farming communities, with stakeholders, with people that eat food, essentially, it brings them back into relationship with the what sustains harmony and life on this planet. So we make better decisions, we have better human relationships, we support and discern and have that discernment in how we show up in life, and that could have a potent effect on how we take care of our landscapes and steward our landscapes.
So there's tonight is a bit of a gathering in the name of giving opportunity for people to understand some of the initiatives. Probably should be over here so people can hear me. Tell us about what's happening tonight, or that initiative generally.
So one of our key initiatives at the moment is a big awareness campaign around where we are in our food system and the human story attached to food and what food transition might look like. So that encompasses a docu-series, which we are now looking for ways and means to support that. We've got a beautiful team that we've gathered together of world-class people that we know can deliver a product. We have a story that needs to be told, which is our food system and the people that grow our food, and that the story that needs to be shared amongst consumers about the work that they do, so we can bring back that relationship. So tonight we're gathering a bunch of beautiful people in a wonderful location to share that story and share the importance of what we think something like that can do for our food community and our farming communities. Amongst that, we also are super passionate about farmer health and wellness. So in the background, we're working on what could be a farmer health program that is full spectrum, not some reductionistic kind of story where we look at mind, body and spirit, because spirit gets lost in all the conversations in agriculture. And I mean, our DNA is in essence our storytelling capacity to bring people and invite people back into relationship to their food. Because once you do that, you start having a relationship with the landscape and the people that grow your food.
And how people listening what can they do on the back of this? I mean, I'm not even sure when it's going to come out, but it'll be wedged somewhere, not too far away, I trust. But what can people in the back of listening and be inspired by both of you? Where do they go? What do they do? How can they get involved? What do they need to think about? Join the team.
So there's always an invitation, and it's always about relationship, right? So come and follow what we're doing. We conduct events constantly. We're always in conversation and relationship with our farming communities. I'm going to be on the road for the next God knows how long.
You come visit?
I'll
interview the boys.
I'm ready to visit.
I prefer to interview them than you.
Yeah, that's right. That will be more fruitful.
Honest man speaks.
I think that this is, such a special time for Farmers Footprint Australia because it's done its appropriate work, which is to listen, as we were talking about earlier. We forget to listen, and there's too much emphasis on talking to God instead of listening to God. And so Farmers Footprint has been on a 2-year journey, really, of deep listening. We began the process together, Blair and I, ironically, in the first week of the pandemic, as it broke out in Melbourne in 2020 there. January of 2020, we were together intentioning the birth of this Farmers Footprint Australia, and it feels very pertinent that here it is birthing itself into its first real harvest, I think, as we look at the big film project that we're looking at, the farm apprenticeship program that they've put together and is now graduating a couple of great new farmers in these coming months, and the mental health program that's been visioned here and everything else. It's very exciting that the couple of years of listening deeply to this community, Farmers Footprint has been able to identify the human story within the Australian matrix of the food systems and farming and the rest. And one of my favorite quotes that really shaped Farmers Footprint as we formed it in the U.S., 5 years back, was this great quote that is attributed to many different people, I guess, at this point, but it says that humans are not made of cells, but of stories. Mm-hmm. And that is why Farmers Footprint has made it our focus to allow farmers to tell their stories to the world, which, again, isn't being done enough. I think too much of the regenerative movement has been farmers telling each other how to do this thing instead of really telling their spiritual journey of reconnection to land and reconnection to self through that land. In the same way that the tree introduced me to self in the forest of France this year, I have seen farmers rebirthed by being witnessed and being witnessed to the beauty of the land that they are stewarding. And so this Farmers Footprint story that's emerging, I think, will be one of the best told in the world. That a very talented team of Australians have been attracted to support this film project. Great producers, great directors, great team. So much beautiful content to be created here. So while the story is emerging globally of what a regenerative future looks like, I think Australia is going to be a standout in its recognition of the need to heal the wounds between our indigenous wisdoms on this land, the indigenous peoples that embodied those wisdoms, and the immigrants that have come here, the colonial arrival, and the reparations of human relationship, and how that underpins our food system, how that underpins relationship to reconciliation and restoration of our land and our relationship to it. So Australia is waiting to be one of the standouts in this regenerative movement, and all of you listening would strongly encourage you to jump to the farmersfootprint.org.au website and join the community. That's what's really made this thing potent. We have Farmers Footprints all across the world now, and there's a great Japanese proverb that shaped the title of the organization, which is that the best fertilizer for a garden is the footprint of the farmer. And so Farmers Footprint was a recognition that the land will respond in beauty and abundance when we walk again on her surface with the bare foot that could sense her beauty, and introduce ourselves back to her. She wants to know us, and the planet is waiting to respond. So give the plants in your world a blessing by seeing them and sending some love their way, because you are a special technology capable of distributing that vibration of love. So do that broadly to the nature around you, and it's going to love you back richly and abundantly, and it's going to do all the healing of the traumas you carry of your previous generations within you, and you can be part of this new humanity that's emerging. So that's an invitation.
Ready and willing.
On that note, gentlemen, thank you so much. You both made me miss my children even more than I already do. I'll let you know when this is coming out.
Thank you. Thanks for having us on.
Again, let's do this again when the time's right. I'll have to go through your bloody, what's this guy now, your manager or something? Hello. I have to go through him.
Yeah, you do.
And love you both very much. It was such a lovely weekend, and so I'm looking forward to tonight too, and every other thing you guys are up to. So we'll spread the news.
Thanks for the support, brother.
Thank you, Charlie.
You want to hit that red button, that big record button down there?
First, thank you, Blair. Thank you for being who you are. Thank you for your precious leadership of this Farmers Footprint team. Thank you. It's been inspiring. It's been awesome.
This podcast is produced by Rhys Jones at Jaeger Media. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to subscribe, share, rate and review. For more episode information, please head over to www.charliearnott.com.au.